You may take a break. Not us. We never take a break. We're always on. PPRNradio.net. Music 24/7.
Good evening, everyone out there in Radio Land. Tonight is Monday, 8:30, and it is the Open Source Recovery Radio Show. Your host, Dr. Mark Bono, from the Center for Compassionate Recovery in Madison, Connecticut. Welcome, everyone. So, as you are probably accustomed, I have a guest tonight who has yet another inspiring story and another inspiring organization. And it's just a litany of people who have jumped in the pool here and have decided to do something to improve the quality of care and to create resources and to combine resources out in the community for the for addiction and in many cases for the opiate epidemic that we're all too familiar with. So I have the pleasure tonight of introducing to you Anna Gopian, who is the CEO, owner, and visionary of TriCircle. And is it TriCircle or TriCircles? I always mess that up.
It's TriCircle Incorporated.
TriCircle Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
Just no, not plural. And Anna has agreed to come on the show tonight and tell us all about the wonderful work she is doing and is going to do as she's developing a vision for this fantastic nonprofit organization that I really believe is going to be just a tremendous resource out in the community, and I'm excited to have her. So thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate it. And what we generally do here, Ann, is we take the time to really allow the audience to come to know what it is that you're doing, and certainly some of the whys, and really get to understand that there is a whole host of people out there like yourself that are doing something special. And in your case, you're really tackling quite a large vision of recovery. Can you maybe can we start maybe with just a brief overview of the overall vision of TriCircle?
Certainly, and thank you very much for even having me on the show. TriCircle Incorporated, it does have a very spectacular vision, and it's something that we're working on in increments. Right now we're in phase one. Phase one started about a year ago, where we also were able to gain the 501c3 status, including a board of directors, which is evolving and growing and strengthening itself and coming to know the intention. I sit at all the board meetings, and we also have clinical advisory board meetings to help us develop the end of phase one, which would be AM, PM, IOP programs.
And even before that comes to fruition, you already have some resources out there, correct?
We do, which is amazing. It's really supporting the why, which you had talked about. Why do we do what we do? It's because the stigma and the isolation created behind the disease of addiction is just as detrimental as the disease itself. So I started getting involved with hope and support groups for parents, guardians, and others that have someone in their life, a loved one, that is directly affected by a substance use disorder, trying to, create peer support environments. I am a woman in long-term recovery, which for me means I haven't used a drug, which includes alcohol, for me since July 13th, 1995. So TriCircle Incorporated partners with a licensed person, professional, could be an LADC, LMFT, all the other alphabet soups of licensed folks. And then people like myself. There's a few of us already we have pools. So partnered up 2 people per group.
Right.
Between 3 different towns, we have 4 meetings as of now, but we do have other proposals out to other towns to evolve and grow. So it's once, in some cases, it's twice a month, and the other 2 are in pilot programs right now, 6-month pilot programs,
Okay.
an hour and a half each.
And you had so the towns are actually sponsoring these
Yep.
groups? That's fantastic.
And I think it's a vested interest because everybody, every town, every person seems to know someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, we were just talking about the CARES organization, which has some similar resources. And the woman who runs that, Donna, her son, he has a web a Facebook page called Everyone Knows Someone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's Matt. I got to
Matt,
talk to
that's
him.
right.
Yeah.
He's a great
They're
kid.
both great.
Yes.
We just collaborated on a great purchase of 12-panel drug tests that we created to make sure that it was covering the spectrum that we wanted it to cover. So low cost. In our case, we make it available for $5 at the groups is one of the amenities that we offer.
Great.
And then we use it as the tool that it is,
Yeah, I actually have a pretty strong. I've seen drug tests really be used as tools for families in terms of, and I'm assuming you probably have similar ideas, but in terms of sort of taking that issue of trust out of the making it's the elephant in the room, and then using it as a drug test as a tool to say, okay, as someone who is struggling with addiction and wants to regain your trust, I'm willing to provide you with a drug test so that you, as someone who loves and cares about me and supports me, can have the peace of mind to know that that I'm not using, despite sometimes there are little things that someone who's hypervigilant and looking for signs of use, you're tired, you don't sound right, where did you spend that money, all those kind of things, right?
Absolutely.
And so the drug test becomes this sort of definitive black and white thing that people can use everyone can agree, let's use this as a tool for removing that negativity out of the relationship and to build trust. Right?
Yes, systemically, too. The family is just as involved and just as much part of the disease of addiction because it systemically attaches itself. Everybody is affected.
Right.
So this helps that person, the loved one, instead of loving them to death, you know what I mean? They're doing the best they can with the limited information that they have. So they're going to learn boundaries also. And it's 2 ways. It has a lot more in it. I also think it helps the client or patient, however you're, the loved one.
Right.
Looking at that as an opportunity to save face because it's hard to make all the changes that are expected from someone that has a substance use disorder. So they're not so much going to let go of all their friends at once, but it's a tool also to say, hey, my mom, my dad, they got a drug test. And I can't. Sorry, dude.
Right.
So it's another great tool that way.
Even in my practice where as I was talking to you off the air a little bit before we started, the culture that I very heavily, develop and nurture at my practice is this trust and openness with the clients, and in some ways I wish the drug tests were not necessary because we really just want our clients to tell us if they've had any kind of slip up with opiates or with any other substance. But of course, the clients actually themselves will say, I like having the drug test. It helps keep me accountable. I know that I want to come in here and provide a clean drug test, and I don't want to have to say I messed up. And so there's an added incentive to not use when they know that they're going to get drug tested, even though they know we're not using it as a punitive measure, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The shame and guilt's pretty nasty, especially when you're just coming off of it, and the noise in your head, the negative talk that happens regularly too. So I do like the fact that it's another level of accountability, but also confidence building, integrity. A lot of the principles that we've lost in the process of active addiction.
So you have multiple hope and support groups going on, and they're co-facilitated by a professional and someone with lived experience, which I think is a great model. And you also do some educational sort of training programs through that. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Where the towns that we're sending the proposals into, I want to also find out what resources are available in that town to support the same intention and the folks in their area. So I'll collaborate with the town that we're working with if we were to acquire a proposal of 6 months and say find a date and a time which would work for them. The first one we did was a 2-day event, a Friday evening and a Saturday day. And then the second one that we had done was just a Friday evening. So we bring in all the resources. Some are state resources and then mostly local. And we collaborate for information and resources, and then we add in the back end of both of the days on the naloxone training. Mm-hmm. So there's the other organization I'm a big fan of is the Greater Hartford Harm Reduction Coalition.
Yes, I was talking to Mark, who runs that, and he's agreed to come on the show as well.
Awesome.
And so I'm hoping the next week or two, we're scheduled to sort of have a phone conference so I can learn more about that organization. But I've heard great things about that.
Oh, definitely, and also work with a mobile prescriber. So a person that I call to let them know the town that I'm working in and looking to propose, and they get the pharmacy locally that is willing to come on board to this event with us. So with your insurance card, you're able to, with or without your insurance, if it doesn't work out, we're able to have you trained, more informed, and walk out with a naloxone kit.
Great. Mm-hmm. Well, we should talk more off the air because I know that in my practices in Madison on the shoreline, and neither Donna's organization nor I believe yours has a support group anywhere really near the shoreline, and so that's an area where where I know people would definitely benefit from.
Excellent.
And we have the space at my practice, and I'm not sure. Yeah, and I'm not sure how you approach the towns. I'd be curious where you go to begin that process, but I'm pretty sure Madison, there's an awareness of at least certainly the opiate epidemic, and as a beginning, and so maybe they would be open to supporting that process. I look
forward to talking to you on that because we have eyes on the shoreline, definitely.
Good.
All the way out to Groton. I've talked to someone, but I have I think it's Branford's in the Chute. So we have a couple towns now that we're working with.
Oh, great.
And that would be in addition to what we already have. And then the shoreline's definitely, it's everywhere. There's 169 towns in our state.
Absolutely. I mean, people ask me why I started the practice in Madison, as if, Madison has some special, I think we have some feedback going on.
We do.
There's an echo. So people ask me why I chose Madison, as if maybe Madison had some unusually large opiate epidemic. But at that point, the office that I found was really nice. It was inviting and cozy and charming, and the cost was not so bad. The rent was relatively. I hope my landlord's not listening to this. The rent was relatively affordable, and so I said, "Yeah, this is great." It didn't matter. You could throw a dart, and at that point, when I opened it 2 years ago, and I think that there are some areas that are very underserved, though. The shoreline is not exactly overserved, and I know going out towards Groton, New London, up towards the casinos and that whole corridor up there, I know I've actually spoken to people who are in the know, and there really is a lack of service in that direction, too. But anyway, so the support groups are great, and maybe we can expand on those. Maybe I can get involved in helping you with that. And so also tell me about the other part of Phase 1, which is a drop-in center, or is that Phase 2?
No, that's
Phase 1, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I got that right.
And that's where I hope to spend most of the focus, because it's so large, the vision. It had to be broken into increments for us to be able to do it successfully and with the integrity and transparency and accountability that we want to represent as an organization. So the drop-in center, I think, is just one more added addition and component of success. It's engagement. It's engagement.
Absolutely.
So not just an intensive outpatient program, an IOP, but hopefully to roll into an outpatient program, which is extended aftercare from that. But if we were to create something, in everything we do, we always ask, how could we be different?
Right.
Because this isn't just happening just now. This has been going on for decades.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hit a different demographic and brought it to social media, which is evolving, So it's not a big secret, not in the world I come from.
No. So the drop-in center, I actually have some experience because I used to work with people with severe and persistent mental illness out in California. And they had this sort of clubhouse model out there, which is drop-in center, And that was really effective for those individuals, where they didn't have to feel that they were being pulled into some formal system of care, office, but they could just casually get to know the people that worked in the drop-in center, who can then sort of naturally, organically connect them to representatives who would come by, who had resources from the system of care. And there was so much, those individuals often were homeless, and this is a place they could come to take a shower and do laundry and watch a movie and just be very humanized, and that was a great way to, be a program of attraction,
I think you just extended my whole mental process in that one statement by adding in laundry and showers.
Yeah.
I don't think we've evolved in that way in thinking, but now it's in my head. So
well, I think that was particularly important because we were focusing on a population that had very large homeless components. So that was necessary.
Our drop-in center, from where we are now in the conception of it, an idea, we're looking at a location now, trying to create, what it is we need so it's serving all of our needs, it's compliant and all that. And we want to be able to have not just, a place to work on a computer and do a resume, that even though that's one component. We have already, and it's out of my house, but I can't wait till it transitions out of my house, an eBay store, because we want to have a form of employment,
right,
in skill building and in integrity.
That's
so we
great.
created a nonprofit eBay store.
Yeah.
And we're changing in the who's working for us in that area right now. So, it's a lower, it's above minimum wage paying job. But if there's more than one person providing that, we can build it into our program. So it's easier to get a job with a job.
Right.
And when you're building resume and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about the drop-in center model, but just because of my experience, I'm curious, have you thought about having, in the spirit of being a sort of a program of attraction, have you thought about creating an avenue where people who might be struggling with addiction but haven't been ready to accept or reach out for help but might be willing to come in to the drop-in center, not under the guise of going into a program, but just a place to recreate, refuge, socialize, and then with the idea is that then hopefully their defenses will come down and they'll be more open and willing as they create some relationships with people to move towards actual care and treatment. Is that part of your plan? You
Absolutely.
think?
Building the curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's excitement to me.
Right.
Absolutely. And the fact that we want a full calendar. So when you look at a calendar, you see morning, afternoon, and evening. So I'd love to diversify the options within that, and especially multiple pathways of recovery.
Right.
I think there's plenty of avenues to, folks aren't going to be, they won't all be closed meetings. So, of course, that'll be option,
absolutely not. Yeah.
right there.
A few weeks ago, Anna, we had a gentleman on who a guest, Adam from Musical Intervention. Have you heard of that program?
Is that downtown in New Haven?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
near Gateway, where I went to school. I think I've been there.
Right, and so that I could just see that kind of thing too, where because so many people in recovery or still struggling with addiction have great musical talent, and then who doesn't like to listen to live music, and so I recommend you. They have open mic night on Thursdays, and you could go and it's a safe environment, and there's a lot of great there's this great vibe there, and the talent that I witnessed when I went was, I'm a layperson, I'm not a musician, but boy, I was sort of blown away. And so that, I could see that maybe, I like how I'm designing a drop-in center for you, right? But I could see that being like, the Friday night
Music's
thing.
a huge
yeah,
avenue.
that's a huge way to attract people in, and make
So is
them
art.
feel
Other
absolutely
forms.
any form of art, yeah.
Yep.
So
Like vision boards, and there's so many different group things that you can do, painting and even the music component, but bringing that in towards like the yogas and the meditation.
yes,
And
absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely. There's I actually have just started doing some yoga myself, and the place that I do it at, I haven't been to this particular yoga group, but they have a yoga recovery group there.
Yeah, Y12SR, Yoga 12-Step Recovery.
Yeah, that's it.
It
Yeah,
is awesome.
Yeah. So that's another great
That's
thing
in
to do.
Brantford. Isn't
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to a refuge recovery meeting out that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many different 12-step programs, and I don't think one is bad. One worked for me, but in
Right.
particular, but it doesn't mean that's the only way. And
Right,
I'm
and
definitely
one of my co-hosts is not here this evening. Alicia always talks about multiple pathways.
right. And I'm also a board of directors member for CCAR.
Okay, so that's
Hence my attraction to the drop-in center,
Right,
and
right.
multiple pathways of
right.
recovery.
And so a drop-in center just lends itself perfectly to that kind of thing, and that way people who are interested in different things can sort of gravitate. Whether it's yoga or music or art or
And the recovery coaching component, having that on the floor of our facility, making those folks available. Of course, it would be an employment opportunity as well.
Right.
And wanting to work with internship opportunities, because then that is reducing the client to staff ratio. And having people at the smoking stick outside, and having people just sitting and chilling in the drop-in center itself to oversee a concern or something that needs a higher level of attention,
Right.
just to open, and make sure that nobody's out there glorifying the story and getting caught into.
it's a delicate balance to make sure that kind of thing people aren't selling or using on grounds, and not to shame people if they're still struggling, but to keep it in a safe environment, and so I think that has to become such a strong culture that people who are still struggling won't want to disrupt that culture.
Right.
That's really the key. Is everyone sort of respects that culture, whether they're still struggling or not. And that takes work and a kind of little magic.
Yes, I agree.
So that's sort of the phase one, is the hope and support groups, and then the drop-in center. And then talk to us about the vision for the phase 2 IOP program.
Well, IOP is phase one.
It is still part of phase one. Okay.
That captures, that's the tail end, because it takes so much involved to actually create something like that.
Absolutely.
Way more than my great idea
Right.
even could have wrapped around.
Right.
So phase one is including the IOP program. Phase two, releasing the intent for recovery housing.
Right.
Gender specific in regards to the IOP as well as in the recovery housing component.
So the IOP will be gender specific.
Yes, there's a couple different facets of what we're going to do to be different. A question we continually ask, how could we be different?
Sure.
So the recovery housing, same thing, gender specific, and location. We hope to also still be in Wallingford. Phase 3, it gets so big that I'd rather not talk about it here.
Okay, that's fine.
But I will look forward to coming back and sharing it with you.
As we come closer and you're
Yes.
more ready. So now I understand the IOP is part of phase 1, but can you talk to me a little bit about what sort of things are? I know that you're still shaping the vision, but what's come across and your vision in terms of what would be different about the IOP compared to other IOPs?
Well, what we're looking at now is expanding from a 12-week model. And, again, we're packaging it to be different. So we think there's a very strong component of this difference would be family involvement. Family and support involvement, because some folks have burned all the bridges and don't have family and relationships. Right. So integrating something, we have one of the board members is very engaged and highly educated in something called constellation work. So having that involved, and because you don't even need your family present, you can have someone representing. So it's really not just for the person engaging in the exercise, but the witnessing of it also has a strong effect. So going forward, that would be another, it's not like a mandatory. We really wanted to be a part of the assessment included. And
yeah, if you again, that comes down to culture, right? If you set up a culture of that, your family, as you define it, should be part of the process, should be part of the intake process, should be part of the treatment. That would be unique. People talk about that, but they don't often do it.
Gender specific was the other one.
And gender specific obviously allows you to take on some topics that are not so easy to do in mixed groups. Some trauma, right?
Well, that's it. TREM and MTREM. Our hope is to be able to close the groups after 2 weeks. And then to extend the care, including the trauma. So if we have a 3-day program, 3 hours a day, and what we do is build the trauma work into the middle of the week and the middle of the day, that will be something that we can be consistent through the whole 12-week process.
And have you gotten as far as thinking about how to handle the whole trauma piece, just in terms of, there's always that delicate balance, right, of how, if you're going to do trauma work in a group, that's always tricky because of triggering each other, and also just the whole delicate balance of doing any kind of trauma work while someone is in early stages of recovery.
Right, and that was a strong topic in conversation with this past week clinical advisory board.
Right.
Because how you do that, it is an amazing balance, but very necessary, because in treatment, a lot of the time, there is no aftercare, and then they're coming out. But when you want to continue the care, because it's probably been talked about, we don't want to just wound somebody and then send them back out on their own again.
Sure.
I believe that the substance that they engaged with, not only does it have the ways and means to get more, creating more trauma, but usually it's what solved the problem of a trauma beforehand. This drug is the solution, not the problem.
Absolutely. The way I this isn't my terminology, but I certainly gravitated to it. It's the first time I read it, but addiction is best conceptualized as a maladaptive coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then everything that comes along to stay within that culture usually has, unfortunately, added, traumas. The ways and means to get more can be really encapsulating, you got to come off of just my own personal lived experience. It kind of gets me all disheveled, because I'm like, the reason I started using in the first place, and versus to why I continue to work on my self-care. First of all, I want to practice what I preach. As a woman in long-term recovery, I want to be the hope of what's possible. But I sit amongst parents, guardians, and loved ones, and that evolves into hope for them to what's possible for their child.
Yeah, there's a term that I used to use when I taught professionals on how to treat co-occurring disorders. I called it holding the hope. Right? Your clients in the beginning, often they're somewhat hopeless and helpless because they've been through a lot of treatment, quote unquote treatment failures. Although sometimes when we look back at that, especially with opiates, I find that the system of care failed the client. The client didn't fail the treatment,
right.
but they experienced it as treatment failure, and so they developed some learned helplessness along the way, and so my job as a clinician is to we got a caller, but we don't have a Peter.
Oh my!
We've been abandoned. Go away, caller. You don't hear that on a radio station too often. So, we sure hope Peter comes back and answers the phone. What was I going to say? That's probably Jackie, Jackie, if you're calling, stop calling. See, that was her. I bet it. Where was I? So you have to, what I do with new clients that come in is and I've said this on the air a few times, I sort of look them in the eye and I tell them, if you follow the model at this program, at my practice, the Center for Compassionate Recovery, if you follow this model, I guarantee you will recover from opiate addiction. And there's sort of a little bit of a disbelieving look, because that's a big statement. And
it actually concerned me. The first time I ever heard you share, and this is just being honest.
Yeah.
You're still looking at me right now across the room, so hopefully you'll stay engaged. You promised. And let me tell you, it's just inside of me. I don't think it's changed. It sounds unethical.
And that's fine. And this is how I actualize that. Then I have them, when they start group, I have the group members introduce themselves. And the group members will introduce themselves, and I ask them to tell them, how, what got you here in terms of some of the history of your addiction, and how have you been doing since you've been here. And one by one, a new person comes into one of my groups, and very typically, they go around the room, and they're introduced to a whole bunch of people who have a whole bunch of clean time. I've been here for 8 months, and I've been clean for 7.5 months. And as they sit there and look around the room, and they see that people who are stuck with it are, by and large, not only are they telling them how clean they are, they're telling them, I've got my career back, I've got my family back, I'm back in school, and they just hear one, recovery after recovery after recovery. And so what I promise them is not that they'll have perfect recovery, but if they keep at it and they keep with us and they stick with us and they don't abandon their recovery process, as long as they're not in jail or dead or institutionalized, as long as they avoid those potential consequences, we will stick with them and they will make it, because pretty much almost everyone does. And so that it is a big statement, but it's one we back up, and it's not me who backs it up, it's the other clients in the practice. And I literally can see like the light bulb going off sometimes when someone, because they've been in a lot of programs and they haven't sat in a room where one person after the other is just doing so well. And the clients will tell, routinely my clients who are established clients will tell the new person, listen, this works. This is a great program, this is a great model, and if you want it, this will work for you. And so there's a lot of that holding the hope kind of thing. So, sure, I get it that, you can never promise them they're, 100% they're going to get it. But we give them a lot of hope, and with good reason, And I think sometimes that's so important for people starting a process, and especially ones who've been, oftentimes, they've made multiple attempts, detoxes, and residential programs that have not worked. And they really need to see that there's a chance for them,
I think it concerned me when I heard it, where I heard it. We were in that room. It was very surreal to see Tim and Laura Lally's mobile memorial at that time. And I know those were, I knew some of those kids on the wall, and didn't minimize the fact that they tried. And I didn't want them.
And like I say, it's not the clients that failed; it's the system that failed the clients. Is the way I look at it, because the practice, opiate addiction, it has to have all the right elements. Everything has to be there, and it has to be working in the right way. And then, it really has a really high success rate. But people don't typically think of opiate addiction treatment as having a high success rate. But, we did a snapshot a couple of months ago and looked at our clients, and we had 81 clients in my practice, and we included anyone who was there for 3 months or more. And at that time, we looked at their drug screen over the course of the last month, and we had 97.5% of those clients had no opiates in their system during that drug screen. So it works,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So from the hope and support group component, from being around parents, guardians, and loved ones, that I don't want to invoke any kind of false hope. So there's that fine line between false hope and initiating that.
You're also probably working with some people who have family members whose loved ones are not quite yet committed to recovery, or haven't found a recovery process that they're fully engaged in, which is you don't know how that's going to go.
And the groups are meant to support their self-care.
Right.
Because when I see a loved one change, meaning the parent, guardian,
Yes.
or loved one, no joke, their loved one changes.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
but
That-
there's nothing left of them by the time they come to the group, and they've tried absolutely everything.
Right.
And unfortunately, in a lot of the times, they've tried everything to keep the secret.
Yes.
So it's not making them bad. I haven't met a bad parent yet.
No. My parents tell me what I do wrong. It's just not about that.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is exactly the same thing that Donna spoke about, how she sort of observed, sort of anecdotally started to notice, wait a minute, the family members that are doing really well in this process seem to have better outcomes with their loved ones. Like,
Yep.
it was just a sort of phenomena that started to, become just more apparent to her, and so it's not a coincidence for
right,
sure.
Right, because you can blend a little craft in there,
Mm-hmm.
and even you can open up the door for, like, again, the multiple pathways of recovery, and look at SMART, which
Yeah.
is kind of supporting the craft, and there's just so much, because we don't down any of the other organizations that provide resources for the loved one. They're awesome. And collectively, everything could support each other. It's connectivity. It's community. That's the key to solving the problem.
And that's why I've been really honored to have people like yourself come on the radio show and really highlight that community that's really developing sort of out of necessity, and sort of filling in a gap where our official system of care is not necessarily filling that gap in as fast as we want or the way that we want, and so people like yourself are sort of rushing in and really providing a continuum, which is what you're really building, and really providing resources that otherwise just wouldn't be there. It's really inspiring what comes. Obviously there's a lot of tragedy that comes out of the opiate epidemic and addiction at large, but it's also so inspiring to see people like yourselves and Donna and Matt, and we had a gentleman on who created this program, Soft Landing.
Oh, I know, Daryl McGraw.
Yeah, and it's like this one's inspiring story after the other, and
I like we're in the same circles. That's great.
yeah, yeah. So the IOPs you mentioned was going to be a little longer than the typical 12-week program.
Our hope is, and we have to package it and then market it.
Yeah, and does that include like marketing to insurance companies?
Of course it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that because
Yeah.
they have these preconceived notions about how long each stage of care should be and each level of care.
But when we look at statistics, it is the length of something, and I know the system seems to be pushing people towards intensive outpatient programs versus residential treatment or inpatient treatment, and it's concerning. Certain things need different levels of care, so I wouldn't want to push it all into one box and think it's going to work for everyone, because it's not a cookie-cutter situation. And
Right.
epidemic of opioid addiction is what's hitting social media right now, but it's not the only drug of use that's happening, and there's other ways that I've engaged with projects to bring awareness to folks, and I really, it is something that's unfortunately, and I hate to even say it like this, gained popularity. What's happening there and what's happening in that town? And it's every town.
Yeah, there's this sort of, you see this even on like HBO specials. You see these HBO specials about these particular areas in the country that are like supposedly devastated by the opiate epidemic, but they're not really any different.
They're having a great time over in here, though.
I mean,
and
yeah,
they're devastated.
Yeah,
That's
Ohio.
silly.
These I've seen one on Ohio, one on Cape Cod, and it's just like trying to sort of, depict these places as these outcrops of where, but really it's everywhere.
Yeah. And the synthetic components, the complete synthetic drugs that are making it in from overseas, I don't even know what to say about stuff like, and even the synthetics that are attached to marijuana and just the different, I can't imagine changing a component, but look at the people that are doing it, how intelligent, and if we can just refocus, you know what I mean? Because usually people come up with their best ideas of, how they're going to, either acquire it, split it up, market it out to their friends, and become and support their own habit. Then they become their best customer.
Right.
And and the shame and guilt attached to that is something that we have the rest of our lives to work with, and to heal from.
Well, it's sort of hard for people who have the opportunity to make $5,000 in a day and have no other, no other means of legitimate work other than minimum wage, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to convince them to give that up. They have to go through some real hard times to understand that doesn't that very alluring process of making that kind of quick money is ultimately not in their best interest.
I know, and it is hard because you're jumping through music and sports or whatever avenue to that quick. And I mean, an addicted brain impulsively thrives, or it thinks it does. It's very deceiving on where it manifests itself. Because look at the transfers of addiction. So you put one thing down and like whack-a-mole, 3 other things pop up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're constantly looking at how to, interact in life. You can look at food. You got to eat every day.
Right.
There's a transfer of addiction right there. It could be. It doesn't have to be, but it could be.
Well, yeah. Certainly there are a lot of ways to sort of self-gratify.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of making that money and sort of by not following the norms and rules of society. I have a funny story about that. I worked in a federal prison, and there was this guy who was an inmate there, and he was this sort of mid-level mafioso dude, And we're sitting around, he's telling these stories about how he would walk into restaurants and he wouldn't order a meal. He would order the 3 or 4 things that seemed like he might like them the best, so he can try a bite of them all and decide which one he liked. And, he was sort of bragging about how it was no problem because he always carried at least $10,000 in cash on him. And that was my first year out of my doctoral program. And I think I was making like $42,000, something like that. That was with my doctorate, And for a moment there, I started to get a little annoyed. Like this guy who he was not we'll just say he wasn't a very ethical human being. This person is walking around with $10,000 in his pocket at all times. I'm like, I can't order 4 things off the
Mm-hmm.
and then I sort of had to wait a minute. Well, he's in an orange jumpsuit now, and he's eating chow.
Yeah.
And I don't have to eat chow. I can go home.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me in my brain a minute to catch up on why not to be jealous about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if I wanted to admire, which would be the opposite of jealousy. That kind of the yellow jumpsuit does not look attractive.
No, I would not look at an orange, so no.
Oh my goodness.
So that will be an interesting challenge to get the insurance companies to really embrace a different length of treatment or other additional layers of treatment in the IOP that you're envisioning, and to get them to. Now I know that it can be done. I don't know if you're aware that that was a Freudian slip of the AWARE program.
I am.
Yeah, and the AWARE program, they have a totally different model, right?
Mm-hmm. And they got coverage.
And they now have they went out there and sold it to Blue Cross and getting coverage, and I think we're at a place in time where innovation and the ability to provide more effective care with better outcomes has got to be, even for places as impartial, as uncaring in some ways as insurance companies can be conceived of. Even there's a bottom line for them, and usually good clinical care is good fiscal care. It has got good fiscal results attached to it. So that's a worthy undertaking, though.
Well, we're looking at all the different avenues, like I had said earlier, on how we can be different and what's going to provide that. So even if it was an intensive outpatient with the addition of OP that time, the outpatient program, if we just package them together like and versus different than each other. However, it's happening. We're working on it.
Right.
And I'm that girl that doesn't like sleep like without a notepad in her bed because it wakes up and it's just like, we have to be able to do this. I just keep thinking about the statistics online. 144 people in our country die a day. And that just changed in the beginning of this year from 129 a day to 144, and it's probably changed again since that last intake that I had heard of. But
yeah, there's all kinds of horrible statistics. So I heard one not too long ago that if we continued on this
trajectory
at this trajectory for a 10-year period, we would basically have lost the entire population of Baltimore.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
That's really concerning.
Yeah.
And going forward with the hope and support groups, again, I want to say that I don't ever want the families to believe, like I show up as a woman in long-term recovery that's been educated on different levels with substance use disorders, progressive recovery coach with Dr. Michael Pantalon, and I have done the Recovery Coach Academy with CCAR, and then I did the Recovery Support Specialist with Advocacy Unlimited.
Wow, you've made
I'm just
all the
a
rounds.
big fan. I'm a big fan of just taking the component of empathy and lived experience and bringing it to the client so they can understand that they're not alone. But then sitting with the families, guardians, and loved ones, I have not... I'm not able to have children because of my active addiction. I've lost that gift, but I have the flexibility to help other people with their children. So I kind of look at it as a gift and a curse, or a curse and a gift. Yeah, I'm going to flip that one around. So I can't, but I just think having the dynamic at these groups really does make a difference too.
Oh yeah, I mentioned I worked in California with the people with severe and persistent mental illness, and I had a lot of leeway on how I was going to run that program. And it was a sort of assertive community treatment program with, assertive case management out in the community. And I wound up recruiting and training people with... I had the option of taking doctoral students and things like that as interns because out in that part of the country, there's a lot of competition for internships. But I wound up hiring people with mental health and/or addiction histories who wound up becoming just fantastic case managers. They didn't have the knowledge in the beginning. They really had to get a lot of training on mental health issues and addiction issues. But what they did have was sort of this great attitude and philosophy and just a kind of core value system that a real hunger for the work. And it was really a pleasure to just watch them grow professionally. And I sort of chose them consciously over people with advanced degrees. I know that was a little hypocritical of me, but in terms of
it makes sense though.
Yeah, and I never regretted it for a second. They really it's funny, they became some of the go-to case managers. Even had the direct, my supervisor had a stepson who was in trouble, and she specifically requested one of my case managers who had, didn't even have an associate's degree, but, had really become the person that you would assign to the most difficult of clients and the most challenging of persons that, with the most afflicted by their mental illness and addiction. So it was really gratifying to see that.
That's great. And I'm a big fan, and I look forward to integrating different levels of internships and hopefully residencies in the future. And that is a large component of Phase 3 in that program, which we'll talk about in the future.
Which we're not talking about yet.
It's really hard for me to think one phase because they're all breathing and growing and evolving. But internship is great because it's necessary to be putting people through school and inspiring them to go to school. I didn't start college till I was 42. When I first got in recovery, I had to learn how to read better. Learning how to do that with the comic strip section of a newspaper. Small increments of success, building my confidence, and then making a decision at 42 to go to college. And it hasn't stopped. Learning, to me, it's just something, and learning to read is just a whole nother avenue to the world. Like, it's exciting.
Well, your passion comes through, and I'm sure that it's going to carry through to this very, really large and admirable project that you're taking on here. And I feel like the community will really have some much needed resources if and when you get this all going, because I know a lot of people out. We do run in the same circles, and I do. Anytime your name comes up, people are very excited about the work you're doing, and very excited about, your leadership and your enthusiasm. I just sort of universally hear that kind of feedback, and so, if we could clone you, we would have a lot. Connecticut would be rich in resources.
Well, I'd say the same for you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a little mutual admiration club going on here.
All right.
Yeah. So, time. So again. Can you tell me where the Hope and Support groups are? What towns they're in, just so people that might be listening can find out more about how to access those.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, we put it on our website also, so
Okay.
it's accessible through www.tricircleinc.com. You can have a PDF file there too that you can print of the brochures that we have. But Southington has 2 meetings now. They successfully went through their pilot program and were able to find additional funding. We have meetings 7 to 8:30. All of the meetings are 7 to 8:30. So Southington is the second and last Thursday of every month. Middlefield has just obtained a pilot, and they are the third Tuesday of every month. And in East Haddam, they're in their 3rd month. This month is their 3rd month out of their 6-month pilot. That is the last Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
So as we go forward, that will change.
Okay. And so, what is the? I'm just curious. How do they evaluate at the end of the 6 months what to do with the pilot?
Well, at 3 months, we sit down and see how things are evolving and growing, and how we're sharing the information, the attendance. I don't. Of course, anonymity is strongly protected in regards to. I can give statistics like how many people.
Sure.
That's about.
Sure.
All that I do, but we look at the need, and we ask those folks, to share with the people in their networks, because now that they come out, they gain strength, and they gain a vocabulary in how to talk about what it is, and they're going to find more folks in those circles and to support. Well, come with me next week, and
Right.
if they want to email or call the town in which we're serving, that is a great support for those folks to know that the need is there and warrants additional meetings. So a pilot of once a month can evolve and grow like it did with Southington to twice a month. And if the funding is there, that's why collaborating the directors from town to town, it's possible that they can find additional resources amongst themselves.
And I know that since I had met with Donna, she had this brochure handout thing with the different meetings and times, and I've probably made about 4 or 5 referrals since we've met. So if you have anything like that, I would be happy to. I definitely know that I have clients that come from all around Connecticut to my practice, and some of the places where the CARES meetings are sort of far away from some of the other spots where the Hope and Support groups are. So I want to get that from you and be able to just hand them to my clients while they're in a moment. I do a lot of couples counseling, and I make suggestions to the non-afflicted partner, but the affected partner, about going to this support group for themselves. And it's really worked out well so far.
We've listed, we have a links and resource page too. So Donna and Matt's groups are up there from the 4 towns that they work from. And I also just started engaging with another group in South Windsor, Cope Support Hope. So that's another resource that I put up online also.
Yeah. In fact, I have to check my website, but I was asking my marketing person if they would create a page. We do these podcasts from each episode, and we'd like to have a link,
like an archive of them?
Yeah, like an archive, and I'd like to have, like you said, a resource page for all of the websites from the guests like yourself that have been on the show, and have a link to their website. So I'm going to be working on that, and with your permission, we'd like to set up a link from our website to yours.
That'd be awesome. And I did it for the CARES group and any of the groups that are up there that, even the the fellowships that are up there, the links to anything that's up there, if it's highlighted, it's linked right to the resource. So I've asked permission to do so.
Great.
Yeah.
So you must be burning the candles on both ends. I know that. Trying to get this all going.
It's going to be great. I always look at it, and this is what keeps me fired up, is the fact that it's a short-term situation with a long-term outcome. And that's how I see the organization, and that's the work that we do. We want to create, capture time that will produce a person that is thriving in life. So a short-term investment for a long-term outcome, if you look at it in perspective.
Yeah, well, there's research that shows that for every dollar that society spends on addiction treatment, it recuperates $8, just in terms of getting people back into the workforce and avoiding all the kinds of costs that come along with, medical and criminal justice and all that kind of stuff. So, there's no such thing as throwaway people. And I've seen, that's why I sort of got into this field. I saw, you have the ability to be part of a process where someone can completely regain all their potential. And sometimes it takes a bit of time, but the transformation overall is pretty quick. And in terms of the course of someone's lives, and often is long term or permanent, and that's a win-win for everyone, including society. And spending public money on that is
well spent.
Is well spent, and it's the right thing to do. So,
well, I appreciate your time.
Likewise, and at some point in the future, I might ask you to come back on. Certainly, as you come closer to fruition to some of these goals, and as you creep towards the mysterious phase 3, we will. Although I know the basics of that, but we won't talk about that. Yeah, but we'll definitely want to have you come back on, and as things progress, and
I'll get you some of our group brochures too before I leave. That'd be great.
Because I want to directly, for my clients, I want to directly have that resource available for them or anyone else that I come in contact with.
Fantastic.
Okay. Well, Peter, we're just about wrapping it up here, and thanks everyone for listening, and thanks to Anna from Tri-Circle for coming out and giving us the lowdown on yet another grassroots organization that's just shows you what people can do with a little inspiration and a little heart. And I want to say, on a personal note, good night, lovely Thea, and good night, Sullivan, and good night, Connor. I love you guys.
Be well.
Be well, everyone. Bye-bye.
So that was cool.
I hit the city and I lost my band. I watched the needle take another man. Gone.